So we will go ahead and do that from the perspective of the MLS, and then we'll jump over into BrokerMetrics, just so you can see exactly how to pull at least 2 reports in BrokerMetrics. I'll show you some other ones. I think, for me personally, I think the pulling your own stats in the MLS and then utilizing them that way, I just have better comfort than some BrokerMetrics stuff. Plus, BrokerMetrics isn't always up to date, because BrokerMetrics only updates after the 1st of the month, and the MLS, of course, is real time. So if it's all right with you guys, I am going to change my chair so I can actually sit and type. Let me share my screen with you. Get us to the MLS. MLS. Where are you, MLS? Okay. Anyone, while I'm logging in here, anyone have any specific stats they want to know how to obtain? Make sure that we cover. So I'm giving you what you know you want and need.
I just want to know what the difference between BrokerMetrics and agent metrics is. Is there a difference?
No, the answer to that is nothing, except that, why, do you have agent metrics?
No, but I heard that there's broker and agent, so I didn't know if there was a difference. Do we have access to both, or what?
So agent metrics, so BrokerMetrics is a brokerage-based program that that is not supposed to be accessible by the agents in the office. Agent metrics was Terradatum's answer to agents want this data, so how do we get it to them? So there's a separate fee and a separate charge, agent by agent, for all of that. What we decided was, we had BrokerMetrics, we'll just download it onto office computers and give you guys my password. So we cheat so that you guys have access to it. It's why, though, it's only available on a couple of in-office computers. It's not available widespread. I can't make it available on your laptops or whatnot. However, since March the 18th, one of the offers that we made to you and continue to make to you is, if you need something in BrokerMetrics, just let one of the staff members know. We'll run it and just email it for you, so that you don't actually have to come in to use that computer. That's the only difference, Kathy, is one of them they wanted to charge you. One of them they wanted to charge me, so we just kept the charge to me and made it available to all of you.
Got it. Okay.
Rick?
Just don't tell anybody.
Rick, it's Lisa.
Yes, hi.
I would love to see how you got to that monthly sales chart that you showed during our Ignite session.
Days on the market.
Days on the market. You know, how it was by, do you know what I'm talking about?
So the month supply of inventory template?
Actually, you could do a history that showed, like, every month, yes, days on the market, or how many sales, and it was yellow, blue, and red. I should have pulled the chart, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yellow, blue, and red. Yeah, Ryan is asking if you're talking about the heat map.
No, it's not the heat map. It's the other one that shows you where you want to position. These are, the inventory levels. Sold, what's on the market, the bar chart one.
Yes.
All right.
Chart.
And I showed it to you? Why do I have no idea what you're talking about? All right. So if you can find it, I would love to see it, and I'd be happy to show you whatever I showed you, but I'm sorry, I can't figure out what it is you guys are asking for. Listed under contract sold. I showed you the supply and demand chart from BrokerMetrics, which was red lines, blue lines, green lines.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, that's
Oh, okay. So that's the main one we're going to see in BrokerMetrics. Okay. You threw me off when you said yellow lines. I had no idea what you're talking about.
You know, temporarily colorblind, maybe.
All right, so let's do this. Let's screen share with you. Everyone seeing the MLS? Or is everyone seeing the blank screen that will be the MLS? There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So I do everything, not because it's right, just because I choose it. I do everything from cross-property search. I don't do these other limited searches because I can access everything I need from cross-property search because everything's there. With some of these other limited searches, you have to actually add fields to it, and I just find it takes more time. And so cross-property search is where I do everything. Okay, I have no idea what that is. So the first thing I want to show you is how you find your own stats. Right, so we're going to do your own stats, your office's stats, and then your town's stats, so that you can see numbers that you can compare across you, the market center, and the market, if you will, right? So that you can determine whether or not you're outperforming the market, whether you're on track with the market, or you're underperforming in the market, and then turn those numbers and those conversations into scripts. Let me show you where to go first, and then we'll talk about their uses. Yes? Okay. So the first place I want to bring you is your own stats. Now, there's something called, well, it's not really called that. I call it the box. And I work out of the box. Let me show you how to get to the box. So in the cross-property search, right, you don't want anything checked here. Nothing, 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 including a little active, because when you go in, active is almost always automatically checked, right? It's a default. So you want to uncheck everything. All this stuff is blank. The only thing you want to do is you want to come down here, and in the list agent box field, you want to put your code in, right? So I'll just use a dummy code. And then once you have the list agent code in, you want to scroll back up here and ask for closed properties. Now, when you click on closed properties, it automatically does a year back. So you can use a year back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say from the first of the year forward, right? So this is 2020. Do you all agree that 2020 has been a bizarre enough year that we want to just know what's gone on since the first of the year? Because it's not exactly apples to apples if you do something else. So we're gonna just pull from the first of the year. You can go back a year. You can do all of 2019 versus or all of 2018 versus all of 2019. I'll show you some of that in a minute. So we're going to put 1120 plus. That's going to give you everything from the first of the year through today for this particular agent, right? So in this case, 15 properties pop up. So 15 closed list sides, because you asked for closed since the first of the year. Everyone good so far? Okay. Then you want to hit results. When you hit results, down here at the bottom, so you'll see all the results that come up from that discussion point. Okay, so you see how this particular agent has these 5 rentals? Rentals are going to screw up your numbers. So popping back to criteria, my apologies, what you really want to do is instead of keeping all this blank, you can do one of two things. You can kind of click on everything else, or you can do the not button and just do not rentals, right?
Rick, quick question, Rick.
Yeah.
The ID number, is that your MLS ID number that you put in there?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So if you click all the sales, right, you got single, condo, multi, lots, and commercial sales in the property type. That will skew out any rentals closed since the first of the year by you, right? So your number will go in here. So you can see that took the numbers down from 15 to 10 because we got rid of the rentals. And I'll give you a reason why we got rid of the rentals in just half a second. So now you have the closed inventory here for this person. And see here at the bottom where it says stats? You're going to click on stats and then click on tabular. So you want tabular stats. here you have the box. Oh, baby. A nice box, right? So I just call it the box because it's got all of your stuff in, you got it, a box. So from here, you can now determine a bunch of things. It gives you your average days on market as an agent, right? In this scenario, that number is 126 days on market. It gives you your list to sale ratio, right? 96%. Now, I will tell you that for me, part of the reason I use the MLS is because I like the numbers to be exact. If that's 96.4%, I want to know it because it will give me a better idea when I do the market center and the market if I'm close to almost a full percent, right? If this is 96.4 and the town is 96.6, but rounding comes into play, mine's going to say 96 and the town's going to say 97. So it looks like I'm literally closing things a full percentage point behind because of rounding. So I want to know the decimal places for me. So the way you, if you look, this is list to sale price ratio, right? So you're going to take the list price and divide it by the sale price, which is here and here. You've got your average list price and your average sale price. Just do a little math and you've got 438.2, which is your sale price, divided by 456.340. And you get, well, in this case, you get 96.0%. So my point is not able to be made specifically and yet, right? So 96%. I will tell you that when I do these for you guys for monthly updates or for sales rallies and whatnot, it's almost always point something, not the zero, and the MLS rounds.
Rick,
Yes.
is there any reason why all 10 aren't listed? Am I missing something? Like there's only 4 things listed there? You closed 10 properties.
Yeah, and so that shows up right here, closed 10 properties, right?
Just the averages, or I'm confused.
Yeah, so here, look on the left-hand side. You've got minimums. So of these 10,
Okay,
the minimums,
got it.
right?
Okay.
The maxes, the averages, the medians, and then the sum.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure thing. Yeah, so the actual inventory appears on the page before.
Rick, if you do the percentage on your median sale price, it comes out to 95.5.
Yeah. So I don't want that because I want a better number than that. Right? But know your numbers, right? So depending on if you're using median and average, as long as you're comparing, David's point there is from statistically, as long as you're comparing apples to apples to apples, if your numbers are better on the median, well then use the median, right? In this case, the number was better on the average because it was a full 96.0. So we'll use that and then utilize average for the next couple as well. You can't use median on one because it's better and then average on another one because it's lower, because that's cheating, right? You're not comparing apples to apples anymore. Now you're comparing apples to raisins. What else does this tell you? It tells you your highest sale, it tells you your lowest sale, right? It tells you averages, it tells you median. What's the difference between median and average? Okay, so the difference between median and average, the way I look at it, median is a units count, which means median says if the median closed sale price was 417.5, that's actually one of the sale prices. And there were as many units that sold higher than 417.5 as sold below 417.5. So it's the middle of a unit count. Average is a volume metric, right? Average means you sold 10 houses and the volume of all those 10 was X. Well, you can see it right here. Because it's 10, the math is easy. The volume was 4.382. You sold 10 of them, so 4.382 million divided by 10 gives you an average sale price of 438.2. But the one that was in the middle of those 10 is this one, 417.5. So to me, it's the main difference statistically is one's a volume count and one's a units count. And so I know some of you are posting in the chat box. It's hard for me to see the chat box when I'm sharing my screen with you. So better that you unmute because I don't know what you're saying in the chat. Either that or if someone wants to monitor the chat and tell me what questions exist, that would be great as well.
Hey, Rick, this is Ryan. I just had a question as to on the max line.
Yes.
The list price is $859.9, closed is $835, yet it's still showing 100% sale to list price ratio. Not sure why that is.
Yeah, because these numbers are not perfect. I don't know why that is either, which is why I do the math, right? I don't look at these over here on the right. I actually do the math each time. So it's funny that you say that because I would have never noticed that because I don't trust them.
Rick, I think it's off the original. I think that's the original list price.
Could be.
Possibly.
Could be. So I would do the math, and then if you can certainly use this example and ask the MLS that question. I don't. It could well be that we're working off a different number that is here, which seems kind of silly, but right, the sell price versus could be the original list price or the last list price. We'll dive into that in BrokerMetrics. So that's the box that speaks to you and your numbers. The important numbers here are the average sale price here, the average days on market, and your list to sale price ratio. Right, if you ever want to do a quick look up on your volume in the MLS, you got it here. And again, this is list side, right? Questions, comments, concerns? And so now I want to know how I'm doing versus my colleagues in my market center, right? So I'm going to jump back, leave everything the same, take my code out of here, and pop in my market center's code. And hit results. The same inventory list will show up. You have your stats at the bottom. You click stats and tabular exactly the same way to bring you to the box. And so in this market center, we've had 171 listings close with an average market time, the average days on market of 82. Let me ask this question. Is that better or worse than my agent stats?
Better.
It's way better, right? My agent stat was 126 days on the market. So if I'm having a conversation with somebody about my ability to get things sold, I'm now switching from me to my team and I. I'm making that switch and utilizing these numbers, right? I can already see how much better my the market center's numbers are in terms of list to sale ratio, right? Because even the rounded number is 98% versus 96.0. So if you do 424, 975, come on, divided by 435, 510. So this is actually 97.6%, right? 97.6%. But that's over 1.5% better than my agent stat. So again, if I'm utilizing these to talk with sellers, I'm abandoning my personal stats right now and going with my team stats. So my team and I sell houses at an average of 82 days at an average of 97.6%. Because both of those metrics beat my personal metrics. Everyone's with me? And so now let's just for fun compare that to the market. Now you get to determine what your market actually is, right? To be fair, keeping with this agent code and this market center, I'm going to use as the market Brookfield, Danbury, Reading, Ridgefield, and New Fairfield, right? So just because that's the area around, I use the Ridgefield Market Center. These are 5 towns that immediately surround the Ridgefield Market Center where most of our business is done. And so that to me now is the market. Now, if you're listing something in Ridgefield or in Danbury, you may want to utilize just that town. And I'll show you how that looks different from this in a second. Again, so you'll choose the towns, leave everything else the same, go down here and take out the code for your office, hit results, hit stats, hit tabular, and now you'll get the box for those towns. So in those towns, the average days on market, 96. Is that faster or slower than my agent numbers?
Your agent number's much better.
Right, so it's faster than my agent numbers because my agent number was 126. Is that faster or slower than my market center's numbers?
Faster or slower?
So it's slower than my market center numbers by 2 weeks, by 14 days. So now immediately we get to set up a conversation that says, one of the reasons you should list with me this evening is because on average, my team and I sell houses 2 weeks faster than our competitors. Why is that a benefit for sellers?
Everybody wants to sell quickly.
How come? What's the financial benefit to that?
A less
Get a higher price.
Yeah, you sell for a higher price when you sell faster. The longer you sit on the market, guess what? The less money you make. That is a fact. So let's do the math here. 449,730 divided by 461, 816. So the average list to sale ratio here is 97.4. 97.4. That's how fast the town is moving. So let me ask you this: is that faster or slower than my agent number? Faster, exactly right. Is it faster or slower than my market center number?
Lower.
Right, it's slower. So now I get to have a conversation that says, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, part of the reason you should list with me tonight is because my team and I sell houses 2 weeks faster, which creates more money in your pocket. Our list to sale ratio is better than the local market. I'm curious, does it make sense for you to say yes to me tonight in order to put more money in your pocket? Now notice, when it's 0.2%, I'm not waving a big flag on that. I didn't use the actual number. I just said we're better. If that was at least 0.5% or better, I would actually use the number. And write these couple of words down because they're really important in turning statistics into scripts. More than, nearly, almost. You can use those words to turn stats into something a little bit more powerful. Because if your list to sale ratio is 0.7 or so better than the local market, I wouldn't say 0.7. I would say nearly a full percentage point or almost a full percentage point. Because you're still within the realm of what is reasonable. You're not telling a fib. And some of those qualifying words allow you to push the limits on the numbers a little bit. Make sense? Now, the other thing I might look at just to be able to see if there's a better version of this. Say I was listing a house in, let's go with Ridgefield. So now we'll take everything down to just Ridgefield. Leave everything else the same. I want to know, instead of the 5 towns surrounding this house, what's happening just in this town. So days on market in Ridgefield, on average, since the beginning of the year, 113. So if I was going to compare days on market, my 82, my team and I numbers for 82 days on market, with a 5-town radius or the actual town, which one would I use to make a better splash?
Single town.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because now I've got almost a month faster. So you see how that script changes. One of the reasons you should list with me like right now is because my team and I produce results a month faster than the competition. Do you see a benefit to you to getting your home sold a month sooner? And then of course, list to sale ratio, you do the numbers. I'm not going to do them out because you get the point I'm trying to make, right? So statistically, you look at you look at your market center, you look at the town you're listing in, then you look at kind of the market-ish around that town, and you pick and choose and use numbers that are real, actual numbers. You're not making any of this stuff up. You're just utilizing a marketing version of actual stats. Right now, for some of you, you're struggling with what I'm saying because it feels like you're cheating. I can tell you that it's not cheating. You're using actual numbers and you're just comparing different things than maybe you are used to comparing. Don't use your stats versus the whole, versus the town only, because that might, or versus the whole market area. That might not paint you in as good a light. You can still tell the truth by utilizing my team and I, utilizing nearly and almost, and utilizing the better version of where you find the numbers. Questions, comments, concerns?
Yes, the only thing I would, question or just to comment on is you're looking at inaccurate when you look at this view. So it might not be as relevant when you're looking at houses, the specific house you're selling. So they might counter on that. Like, well, that's in general, but how does that compare to houses or, listings like mine?
Well, and so sure, that's true. I will tell you, no one has ever asked me that question, ever. And so they certainly could ask it, and then maybe just be prepared for that. If you want to get specific, you can run colonials from 6 to 7 since the beginning of the year and see what that's done. If you wanted to, right? Just go back to your criteria. Now all of a sudden you want colonials only from $600,000 to $700,000. Everything else remains the same. You click results, you click stats, you click tabular. I have found the numbers don't change all that much when you get specific, right? So now you have 102 days with whatever this is, right? So if you want to get that specific, I will tell you that most sellers will not. So if it's not brought up and the numbers are better more generally, I would just use the general numbers. You can certainly run this to know what it is just in case they ask. Any other questions, comments, concerns? No? Okay, so that's kind of the first piece I wanted to show you. The second piece I wanted to show you was how to pull the month supply of inventory, right? Because that is probably the most important metric that you're using today to kind of figure out and regulate, figure out the velocity of the market and how they're going to jump into the market. Hey, everything aside, anybody know where Griswold, Connecticut is?
Yeah.
Oh, so you all know? Okay. I met some people from Griswold yesterday, and I thought, where the hell is Griswold, Connecticut? Never heard of it before. For those of you who don't know, it's way on almost on the Rhode Island border, over by the casinos.
Goodwill? Griswold. Griswold?
Say it again.
Was that Clark Griswold?
But ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who have not seen Vacation, you don't know what David's talking about, and you need to watch more movies. All right, So, and no, because it was spelled differently. I think he's an A and this is an O, I think. All right, so let's dive into month supply of inventory. And what that references is, if you were in Ignite recently, you know we used that template which broke out what the month supply of inventory for the actual town is and then broke out some price points. So if it's all right with you, I am going to stay in the town of Ridgefield. I shouldn't have unclicked that to use as an example, right? And now I may want to get rid of some of this other stuff, right? So when I do these numbers, if I'm listing a single family house, I want to know what's going on with single family housing. Do you agree that condos and or land may have a far different velocity in terms of pace in the market than single family housing, depending on the market and depending on when? Yeah, I would agree, because I'm certain I heard you all say absolutely. So we're going to change this to single family here. We're going to choose our town over here, right? And then we're going to click on closed. And what you want is you want closed for the last 3 months, the last 90 days. So the way I do that is 0 minus 90. That way I don't have to know what the date actually is, right? So 0 minus 90 in the MLS will give you the last 90 days. When you put it in the closed column, it'll give you closed in Ridgefield, single family, because that's what I've asked for the last 90 days. Just make sure I don't have anything else populated down here. I do not. Okay.
What about your colonial? You have to undo that one?
Oh, yes, thank you. I did have something else. There we go. And I took out the price. Okay. So in the last 90 days, single families in Ridgefield, how many have closed? You see it right there at the bottom, right? $154. You see the result right here? So you don't have to go any further to know what the number is, and that's all you need is the number. So 154 represents how many properties have sold in the last 90 days in this town, no price range delineated. What we need in order to calculate the rate of absorption, right, because the first step to doing month supply of inventory is to calculate the absorption rate. So month supply of the absorption rate is how many homes per month are being absorbed. We just ran for how many months? 3. So I need to take this number 154 and do what with it in order to get a per month number?
Divide by 3.
So you divide it by 3. That's exactly right. Clearly we are on with the math majors today. I appreciate that. I love that about you. Right? So 54 divided by 3 is 51.3. 51.3 for the town of Ridgefield for the last quarter of business is the rate of absorption. 51 homes per month have been absorbed by the market. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. However, we're not there yet. That's only step 1 in determining month supply of inventory. Because now we know what the rate of absorption is, we have to know what?
How many are on the market right now?
Exactly right. So we go up here and click active now, and we're given 138 properties active on the market. Now you can already tell, again, because
Divide by 3.
you're all brilliant at math, where we're going here. If there are 138 active properties on the market, and the velocity of the market, the absorption rate is 51.3 a month being absorbed, you divide that 138 active units
46.
by 51.3
Oh, by 51.
0.6.
is the rate,
2.69, almost 2.7.
right? So 2.7 months supply of inventory. So now here's what that means. What that means is if nothing else changed, if nothing new came on the market, and if the velocity didn't change, we would have only, we would have only 2.7 months before we had zero inventory to sell. Make sense?
Rick, shouldn't the under deposit and continued show play into that at all?
So great question. I do not use them. There are some people who do use them. I don't use them because they're not definitive, right? They're not closed, and yet they're also not really available. So they're kind of in the middle there. Now I know I have this argument with Debbie Orr all the time because she does add coming show and deposit into her closeds. She doesn't throw them into active. I don't think she does. I think she throws them into closed. Debbie, are you on the call? I don't think she is. Let me just take a quick peek. No. So I don't use them. I don't use them because of what I just said. They are not one or the other. They're not really active on the market and they're not closed yet. So we don't know exactly what the story is. How many of you have ever had something go under deposit or under show that 3 days later came back on the market? How many of you have ever had gotten to a deposit scenario, right? And had it come back on the market, right? One word, D, Tiffany. There we go.
You could almost take that as
Thank
part
you
of
for
active,
that.
though.
Thank you.
Say it again, John.
Instead of what does, you can almost consider them though part of active. No, because
So-
technically, in a way, they're still not closed.
Well, that is true, and yet they're not really available to be seen. So I think it skews the number, right? If you add them in, and I'll show you what I'm talking about, just for argument's sake. It pumps the number up from 138 to 300. 300 divided by 51.3 is nearly 6. If you were going and sitting with a seller talking about the movement in the market, now this is the town as a whole, right? We're going to get price point specific in a second. Is it a different conversation you're having with the seller? If D was my seller and I said, so Ms. Brayton, we have 2.7, like just under 3 months supply of inventory. Which, by the way, guys, is that a buyer's market, a seller's market, or a transition?
Sellers.
That's a crazy seller's market. 2.7 is crazy seller's market. Versus 6 months supply of inventory, which is right on the border of transitioning into a buyer's market. Those are two very different messages. Now, because we know what's going on in the market right now, it's easy to say which one is closer to the truth. Which one is closer to the truth?
Seller's market.
Well, yeah, without the shows and deposits. So I don't use them, John. Again, I'm not looking to make anybody wrong if you want to use them. I just don't think you get as accurate a picture as you do when you exclude them. There's something to be said for monitoring shows and deposits separately,
Right.
as a percentage of the actives, right? Because the under agreement rate might help you here. You have 138 actives out of 300 that might be possible if you counted these as actives. So now you've got 138 divided by, 138 divided by 300. You've got a 64% under agreement rate. So 64% of all the properties that aren't closed yet are under agreement. P.S. That's an enormous percentage. An enormous percentage.
It kind of shows the velocity of things.
Well, it absolutely does, right? Lori and Dee, I don't know, I'm not sure who else is on the call. Would you agree that a more normalized market would have closer to like 20% of
Yes.
properties under agreement?
Yes. And that's what I've done. I've used the show and deposit and described it to show the velocity of the market. I've actually gotten those numbers and used them when I've broken it down into the smaller pieces, if you will.
So
Hey, Rick-
you use
Rick-
them separately, yes.
Yeah.
I heard you use my name. I was on the phone with Dan. But what I was going to say is I totally agree with how you're using just the actives, because you have to think that we all look at the MLS, but the buyers are looking at websites that may not ever show and deposits. Generally, they don't. So they're only seeing actives anyway. And so if you're discussing how quickly houses are selling and what's on the market and why you should be on the market, you know, really most of the general public is seeing that small amount of inventory. They're not seeing the others.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And to support what Lori is saying, the deposits, most of them are not shown. The shows might be shown, but they're two different animals.
Yeah. So I think there's a case to be made for looking at show and deposit as a percentage of the actives and monitoring that, knowing that in a more normalized market, we probably see only about 20% under agreement, right? In a slower market, we may see 10 or 12% under agreement. Right now, at least in this particular town, in Ridgefield, we're at 64%, right? So they definitely are usable in terms of helping have a conversation. But I think in terms of month supply of inventory, for me personally, I think they confuse the numbers and don't give as accurate a picture as just using the actives. Does that help, John?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with that 100% because it's sort of it's hard to determine where to put either one of those, but to do it as a percentage of total actives sort of gives another input into what the market's doing and where it's going.
So true. Okay, so now let's where were we at? So we've got 2.7 month supply of inventory in this town as a whole, right? Again, crazy low, crazy low. Now let's do this. Let's break things apart. Because what you guys who were in the Ignite class the other day saw was, you saw a total town number and then you saw it broken down by price point. It'll be interesting to see when we break down by price point today exactly what the differences are. Generally speaking, before this surge in the market, what was typical to see was properties that were at or below the median in whatever town you were working in were moving more swiftly, and anything over the median was moving more slowly. And so when you pulled the town as a whole, you got this kind of middle number that was less relevant because, say, for example, in Ridgefield, the median is probably, 650 or so, right? So if you're 650 as a median, if you were coming to the market as a 450 property, the town as a whole might have been moving at 5 or 6 months, but that took into consideration the higher end that didn't really have to do with your $450,000 house, right? So when you start breaking things down by price points, you get a better picture. So let's do that. All right, so in Ridgefield, you guys help me out. What are our price brackets? Like 400 and under, and then 4 to 6, 6 to 8, 8 to $1 million? Can we do it that way?
Yes.
All
I
right, so
usually do 250 to 400, and then, or, anything up to 400. Yeah.
got it,
sounds
okay.
good. Yeah, for single family, yes.
So 0 to 400. And again, I'm going to do this purposely a bunch of times. I know it seems repetitive, but I want you to hear the formula over and over again so it gets kind of ingrained in your brain and see how the numbers start to unfold. So when you put in the price point here, 0 to 400, leave everything else the same, Ridgefield, single family, you're going to come down here and do closed, 0 to 90, and you get 12 properties. So 12 properties sold under $400,000 in that specific town in the last 90 days. We know that that represents 3 months. So to get a per month number, we're going to divide it by 3. So 12 divided by 3 equals 4. The absorption rate is 4. Now, in order to get the month supply of inventory, we're going to click off of closed and onto active. you see that there are a whopping 6 properties available. 4 divided into 6 is 1.5, right? So 1.5 month supply of inventory exists 0 to 4. Is that faster or slower than the townwide average?
Faster.
Faster.
Right? So it's faster. And in this particular case, I kind of like to look at these numbers like the way they look at the Richter scale. You know, when they measure earthquakes, like when you go from 2.7 months supply down to 1.5 months, that's not just a 1.2 month difference. Like, because the Richter scale of inventory, that's like exponential. You're going from hardly anything to 0, to nearly 0, right?
It's a seismic difference.
It is a seismic difference. Thank you for that. I was looking for that word, David. So seismic. So it really is exponential. And I like to look at it that way. It's not, when you go the other way, if you have 8 months supply of inventory and then you move to 10 or 12 months supply, that's an enormous change in terms of a buyer's market. 2.7 down to 1.5, that's an enormous change in a seller's market, right? So recognize the exponential growth that happens when you start moving around in these brackets. Now let's do 4 to 6. 400 to 600. For those of you who are selling property in Ridgefield, good on you for being on the call today, because I'm doing all your work for you. You can just write down the numbers for the week. So we're back to closed, right? So in this price bracket, 400 to 600, far more active, right? Which for any of you who know the market in the town of Ridgefield, less than $400,000 is just, you're talking about condos usually, right? There's very little inventory there. The more meaty part of the inventory under the median is this $400,000 to $600,000 range. So now we've had 54 sell in the last 3 months, right? 54 divided by 3 is 28. Do I have that right? Doing that in my head, but I think that's right.
Why would you use 3? Don't you need to know what the active is for this? This is closed 54.
So closed for 90 days first, and then you have to create a per month number out of that. So you always divide the answer on the screen by 3 first.
Yeah.
Right? So
28's not right.
18, sorry.
18.
Yep, 18. It is 18. So I was doing it in my head. I should learn not to do that. So 18 is the absorption rate. So now we click off of closed, which means 18 properties per month in the last 3 months sold in $400,000 to $600,000 range. Click on active, and look, you get 18 properties. So you don't have to be a genius to figure this one out, right? 18 a month. There's 18 on the market. That means we have a 1 month supply of inventory. Those of you who have buyers in the $400,000 to $600,000 range who are looking in Ridgefield, does this make sense to you? Right, because you can't find a damn house because there's 1 month supply of inventory, right? So again, to remind you what that means, if nothing else changes, if the velocity of the market doesn't change and nothing else comes on the market, 30 days from today, in that price range, there will be 0 homes on the market. Let me ask you this. Does that put the sellers in a positive or negative negotiating position in terms of how they interact with buyers?
Extremely positive.
Yeah, right? Now, it's always balanced by their motivation, and yet the market is on their side, right? Because what they know is they're a hot ticket. Even if they're a crappy house, they're a hot ticket because there's nothing else out there. All right, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna do it again. Now we're gonna go 600 to 800. 600 to 800, closed in the last 90 days, we have 35. 35 divided by 3.
1.6.
Is 11 point, I'm going to round it up to 7 just because I'm that way. So 11.7 is your absorption rate. Now we have to figure out how much we have on the market. We have 19 properties on the market. So 19 divided by 11.7 is going to be 1 point something, like 1.6 months supply of inventory. So let me ask you this, without knowing anything else, if the first 3 price brackets in Ridgefield, all under $800,000, which we've now crested the median and started to go over the median a bit, are all 1.5, 1.0, 1.6, which are all fully a point or a point and a half more than the townwide average, what do you know is coming as we get higher in price?
We're not selling as well.
Exactly right, right? You're going to start to see the market slow down a little bit in terms of the higher priced properties, because the average was 2.7, and so far everything under 800 is rocket shipping even faster off the market, right? So we know what's coming is a slight slowdown. The question is where? I'm going to do 800 to 1 million. Got 34. 34 divided by 3 is going to be 11 point, probably 1.
11.3.
11.3. So 11.3, and now we're going to find the actives. You got 19, so you've got almost the same number. Wow, huh. 19 divided by 11.3. We got 1.69, so 1.7 months supply. So here's what's interesting. Now again, let's stop each time we do this and just kind of talk about how you're using this. Do you see how much data you get about the market you're listing in by just going through price point by price point by price point, and then building, like we did with that other house in Ignite, that template to say, here's how it's all moving? You're now up to $1 million and still haven't crested 2 months supply of inventory. That is crazy. I'm going to tell you, I don't think I have ever seen that before. Even in 2004, 2005, right?
Nope.
I mean, those of you who were selling houses here back then, never seen that before.
A few years ago, it was like, just like 3 years ago, it was like 10 months, 12 months supply in those areas.
Yeah, easily, especially in these higher ranges, right? So now because we have to get to BrokerMetrics and we're running out of time, I'm going to shortcut this a little bit. If I were really listing a property here, I might go $1 million to $1.2 million, and then $1.2 million to $1.5 million, and $1.5 million to $2 million. I might break it up a little bit more. But just to give you an idea, I'm going to jump $1 million to $1.5 million right now, which might be too large of a jump depending on what you're trying to figure out. But I want to hit the point where we start to slow down, because now I'm curious myself. So last 90 days, 12 properties. 12 divided by 3 is 4, which is your absorption rate, right? With an absorption rate of 4, aha, here we go. So $1 million to $1.5 million, you've got 37 properties on the market. 4 is your absorption rate, so you've got a 9 supply, right, of inventory. So now all of a sudden we've seen the jump. You get over $1 million. So again, you might want to know, if you're listing here, is it at $1.2 million that the number really switches, right? Or is it really over $1 million? You know what? Let's just do it. So you've got $1 million to $1.2 million. You've got 7 solds, right? 7 divided by 3 is going to be 2 1/3. Is that right? Yep, 2 1/3. So 2.3. You've got 13 houses on the market divided by 2 1/3. So now you're up to like 5.7 months supply. So you can see where the break is. The $1 million is the break point. Between $1 million and $1.2 million, you're still in what's really considered a transitional market, but you're in a high transitional market. you're almost into that 6 range. So now you're cresting that buyer side. You add the $300,000 up to 1.5, you jump up to 9 months supply of inventory, right? Now, those of you who have listings over $1 million in this town, this is not a big surprise to you because they're not moving as fast, right?
That's a big yes.
Yeah, right. So any questions, comments, or concerns about what we just did and the importance of understanding the data at that level so that you can be speaking with your sellers about making good choices. Any questions about what we did, how we did it, or how you use it?
So Rick, do you have to manually put something like that into a chart, which is what you showed us during the Ignite?
That is how I do it. If there's a way to get price points with month supply of inventory out of the MLS, I'm unaware of it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I think what you can do is you can run month supply of inventory graphs in the MLS by price point, but you would get a separate one for every price point.
Okay, but so you just take that and drill it down into one chart that you would use in whatever presentation you're doing.
Correct. I like to have it all on one sheet of paper that just paints the price brackets.
Okay.
So that we can look at different price brackets and see the different velocities moving so that they can choose which bracket they want to go to. P.S. As I mentioned earlier, I am a big fan of running this manually because if I'm going to sit in front of somebody and be asked questions about it and have an educated conversation, I feel like for me, doing it manually solidifies it in my brain so I can then talk about it with more authority, right? Because I've actually physically run the numbers. Does that make sense? Okay. So we went through pulling your stats, your market center stats, and your town or your market stats so you can kind of figure out how you're using those stats to market yourself. We've run through month supply of inventory and doing kind of a breakdown of drilling down by price point. The other thing I wanted to show you today was how to use BrokerMetrics. So if it's all right with you, I'm going to move from the MLS. I can do another one of these classes if you're interested in like year-over-year stats and stuff like that, because we won't have time to get to them today. So let me jump to BrokerMetrics. Hold on, I have to just bring up real quick. Where are you, BrokerMetrics? So again, BrokerMetrics is available to you on certain computers in each of the market center spaces. It's not on every computer. You'll know it's on it because there are some codes on the screen, kind of done with what are those things called? Oh God, those labels, the label makers. So there's labels on the screens that have the BrokerMetrics available on it. Okay, let me come back to you all and share my screen again.
But if we're not coming into the office, you said we could call who to ask for that information to be emailed potentially?
So any one of the staff members, contact first line of defense would be Maria and Robert. And then and they will take that order for you. And if they can't do it themselves, they'll engage with one of the rest of us to make sure that we get that done. Right. So if you're not in the office, just let us know which ones you need and we'll email them off to you. Okay, so BrokerMetrics starts here. And you're going to go into Market Dynamics. Whoops, screen sharing has stopped and the window has closed. Well, why did that happen? Okay, are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, so the very first thing you have to recognize when you start in BrokerMetrics is that we pull from 2 different MLSs in our version of BrokerMetrics. And for most of you, you're going to want the Smart MLS. And if you don't do something first, all of your numbers will not make sense. Because if you look here where it says MLS, it defaults to the Greenwich MLS because it's alphabetical. So if you don't come here first and change it to the Smart MLS, when you run all of your other towns and cities and you get 0 or 3 or 1 or whatever.
Can you, Federico asked me to grab some gifts for his clients. He showed me a picture. It might be in the conference room with some boxes.
So, so make sure that you switch this MLS first from Greenwich to Smart. That's number 1. Number 2, if you want the BrokerMetrics supply and demand chart, which is the chart that most people use most of the time from BrokerMetrics, here's how you do it. You're going to ask it for residential, right? If you specifically want condos, you can add condos. I'm going to use just the single family for sale numbers, right? Because typically when we're headed into a listing scenario, that's mostly what we're doing. If that's not what you're doing and you want condo, then click on condo or multifamily, whatnot. But residential, when you click on residential, notice residential rental also checks. You want to uncheck that. Or again, excuse your numbers. Everything else down here, you see where it says beds, baths, price range, all this stuff. I leave all of that blank because this is a town-wide macro discussion that you don't need to get so specific on. Now, if you're running this for a different purpose and you need to run it for a different price range, I think what you'll find is that visually, most of these charts don't change all that much when you do that. So again, for me, it's you leave all this stuff blank. You then have to come over here on the right-hand side and do select an area type and go to cities, right? And so this time we'll use Norwalk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. So we'll use Norwalk. You double click on that or single click on it and click add, right? So if you want North Haven, you can click on that and click add. So you'll see they're building over here. And if you clicked on the wrong one, you can click on it and just click remove, right? These arrows here, just move them back and forth, or you can double click them back and forth, right? If I want Norwalk and Newtown, I can double click Newtown. If I did that by mistake, I can double click Newtown away. So whatever is on the right-hand side, you'll see show up here, Norwalk, and you click OK. And then it shows up here on the right side. So you're asking it to run a report on residential single-family properties in Norwalk in this time period, the last 2 years, with monthly numbers. I will tell you that 3 years quarterly is not as impactful because you're now looking at quarterly stats. And then 1 year monthly and 6 months weekly, there's not enough data to show you trends. So we like to keep it on the 2-year monthly trend line so that you get what you're expecting to see. And you hit search. When you hit search, it'll do its whole little to-do, and it will always bring you here. Notice this is not the supply and demand graph. It's the median sale price graph. You didn't do anything wrong. This is, I think, the question I get asked the most when people are using BrokerMetrics. Like, I can't figure out what I'm doing. I want the supply and demand chart, but all I keep getting is the median sale price. That's because this is the default chart that shows up after the search. You want to do 2 things to move forward. The first thing you want to do is down here in the lower left-hand corner. You see where it says whole time period versus beginning month versus end month? You want to check whole time period so that everything shows up. You see how when you do it this way, everything else ghosts and you only have the first month and the last month? Well, that's not what you want. You want the whole time period. So you're going to check that first. Then you're going to move to the upper right, left-hand corner. You see these 3 tabs. You have price, which is what you're in. You're in the price tab now, again, because that's the default. You have the supply and demand tab, and you have the sales rate tab. Of these 3, where do you think the supply and demand chart might live? Right, in the supply and demand tab. So you're going to first check whole time period down here, then come up here and say supply and demand. Oh, and looky. That's the chart that we were looking for, right? It's the very first chart in the supply and demand tab, which shows you your, let me just reduce you guys a little bit, there we go, which shows you your red lines, green lines, and blue lines. Now remember, we had a conversation. This shows seasonality, right? Here's the winter, fall into the winter. Here's the spring and summer. Now we dip a little bit into the summer, here's the summer. Here's the fall, here's the winter. And then we start going up again in the spring. Even this year, that was weird. We still had seasonality show up, right? From the fall, we had a drop off of inventory, and then we had weirdness here. We started to go up a little earlier, and then we went, right? And we got to stay home for 2 months, and now we see an increase in inventory again. The good news is we also see down here a massive increase in under contracts and solds, right? If you look over the last 2 years, do you see higher numbers than what we saw in July in the last 2 years? You do not, right? And that's all because of that whole pent up demand, right? If you look at April and May compared to last year's April and May, you see how those numbers are actually much smaller, especially the under contracts. Questions about how we got to this graph? Okay, so I'll just give you a couple of other, I'll give you a little tour of BrokerMetrics, and we'll spend 5 more minutes and then we will be done. I appreciate the 75 minutes versus the 60. So here's just another little tour or an additional tour of BrokerMetrics. In these 3 tabs up in the upper left, you have underneath it views. So supply demand has a bunch of different views. The first is supply and demand units. The second is for sale versus for sale last day of the month. I will tell you, I never use that, but it's in here, right? If you go back to price, price will give you that median sales price chart. And then if you click in views in the upper left, the price views are sold average versus median price, average sale price to original price, average sale price to list price, right? Average price per square foot. So if you have other things that you want to utilize these charts for, these are some other views you can take. I will tell you the one that I used to like to use a lot was this one, which is average sale price to original price. Because what this shows you is the dark blue numbers is the original price. So all properties that came on the market in the last 2 years that sold without a price change sold at 97.7% of the 0.7% of the number that they went on the market for. The light blue shows properties that had at least 1 price change versus the original price it came on at. And so if you have to have at least 1 or more price changes, you sell on average at 88.2% of the original price you come on at. I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, which would you prefer? Closing at 97.7% of your original price or 88.2% of your original price? Yeah, me too. And so I'm curious, what do we need to do to make sure that this doesn't show up, price changes, in your experience, right? In your sale experience. That's a cool chart, don't you think? Shows almost, it's like a 9.5% delta between getting it right the first time or not getting it right. Make sense? And then over here in sales rate, you have a bunch of views as well. Now this is a month's supply of inventory graph. Again, I don't use it because all this is Norwalk as a town over the last 2 years. And Norwalk as an entire town is just not quite as relevant or useful to you as price points within Norwalk. And yet this does.
Would you ever use a neighborhood if you were doing this? No, you just keep it to the town?
So are you asking would I use BrokerMetrics for a neighborhood?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it breaks it down by neighborhood.
Okay.
I'm not sure you can get that specific on BrokerMetrics.
But even in the MLS, I'm finding in Norwalk, people, if you leave it blank and there's no neighborhood, you're excluding those houses. They don't get put anywhere. So if it's a Rowayton house and they haven't identified it, it's not gonna be in the numbers.
Yeah, and that's true. And recognize that in some towns, I struggle with neighborhoods sometimes because what I find is that many listing agents are not terribly adept at putting the right information into that because they don't, they come from out of town or they come from out of county. They don't know what the neighborhood is. Now, Norwalk is an example of clearly you have Rowayton. Rowayton is a far different market than almost the entire rest of Norwalk, right? One might argue that Silvermine is slightly different as well, and yet certainly Rowayton is different, right?
Right.
And yet, if you're looking at a town like Ridgefield, well, I'm not sure neighborhood all of a sudden is quite as important because a Colonial in Westmoreland isn't necessarily going to sell for that much more money than something that's not in Westmoreland, right? So if you have pockets in a town or a city that really do make a difference, it's crazy important to run that. And so again, I'm gonna push you into the MLS for that because you can get specific around that better than BrokerMetrics.
Can you show us the list price to sale price? Can you show us that graph just real quick?
Sure. So Lori's asking for, this was sale price to original price. When you do sale price to list price, that means the last list price. So the number here, the delta, is obviously going to get smaller. And you see it tightens up to, if you came on with no price changes, 97.7%. If you came on with price changes, the list to sale ratio versus your last listing price is still over 2% less. So it's 95.4 versus 97.7 if you have to take a price change. Clearly, when you're trying to make a point about getting it right the first time, the 9.5 point delta makes a better visual. However, this is probably more relevant data because this is based off of the last listing price instead of the original price. And that's what shows up in these views. And then in sales rate, I just talked about that. Questions, comments, concerns about the BrokerMetrics data? That's fun, right?
Fun, but I feel a little overwhelmed by it.
So here's what I would say, don't be. Don't be, because just pull it. Like what I would do is I would get up every single day and decide you're listing a new property and decide where it is and what price point and pull all the numbers that you need to list that house that day, whether or not you have a listing appointment or not. Start training yourself, and in a week, Sherry Lee, you'll be like, oh, this is a cinch. You just have to do it 5 or 6 times. So I would challenge you to just create a new listing a day in a different town and a different price point. Go and run all these numbers. You'll have better market stats than any of your competitors if you'll do that every day in a different town.
Okay.
And it'll take that feeling of like, oh my goodness, this is so much away, because you'll just push yourself through it and do it. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Any other questions before we finish?
Greg, really quickly, where do you use this in a listing consultation? Is this sort of like a last, not a last effort, but it's, if other things aren't working, is this what you'd go to as sort of a better convince them?
Which graph are we talking about? What metrics?
Well, really any of them. I mean, the ones you showed earlier, and then the BrokerMetrics as well. What points are these really where you should be showing?
Yeah. So did you miss the listing consultation class?
No, I didn't. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, like in terms of how I'd go about it.
Well, so my answer is what I showed you today is the listing consultation.
Right.
So you bring to the table the macro conversation of month supply of inventory and the BrokerMetrics supply and demand chart that give people an idea of how the market's moving. And then you immediately move to, here are the comps as they relate to your house. So what we went through today was calculating all the macro stuff, which is used every single time. If it were me, I wouldn't go to a listing appointment if I didn't know the things that we talked about today. Because I think that's kind of like, it's kind of like going to a listing appointment with a seller who only speaks Spanish and you only speak English. To me, you need to speak the language of the market. And what we went through today is how you get fluent in the language of the market. So you use those two things. You ask your market conditions questions, and then you dive into the SPA. Does that help? Does that answer that, John?
Right now, I mean, so I'm getting old, so my brain's always foggy. But now I recall the whole, you know, consultation and the SPA and everything now. I didn't quite catch all of your BrokerMetrics. I have to rewatch that on video. But so this is something that we're going to prepare every time, or is this something like when you do the office stats on a monthly basis or quarterly basis? Should we rely on those, or should we redo this every time we have a consultation?
Great question. My answer to that is every time, the morning of. Every time you have a new listing consult, you need to have all this data pulled and relevant to the day you're going, right? Because the market changes every single day. Like some of the days on market and some of the list to sale stuff, you may be able to get away with that every couple of weeks or even monthly, right? Although things are moving so quickly now that I might not really suggest that either. I think knowing your numbers, remember, a big part of your value proposition is that you are local market experts. You are the local economist of choice. And the way you become of choice is to make sure that you speak in such a way that people are like, oh my goodness, like this person knows more about what's going on inside of this market than anyone I've spoken to or will speak to. We need to just hire them. Right? It's how you create your validity. And the other thing that I will just say quickly is I'm not sure that I would use any of this to convince anybody of anything. I think I would use it to educate. And I know I'm picking on that one word, John, but I think it's an important word, right? Because we're not going in to convince people of anything. We're going in to educate them and help guide them to a decision. So it may sound like semantics, but I guarantee you the more you do this, it's less semantics and more mindset. And so I want to just make sure that we have the proper mindset to get the job done the way we want to get it done. It is an absolute level of education. Okay? All righty, guys. I will see some of you at 4 o'clock for our last class, Anatomy of a Seller Transaction. I'll see the rest of you maybe at 3:30 for profit share party. I should see all of you at 3:30 for profit share party. We gave out more profit share than ever in our history. So you should come in 3:30 and listen to the numbers, because the numbers that people received are pretty awesome. And if you didn't get that amount or one of those cool amounts this time, I want you to hear what is possible so that you can be working with your team leaders to grow that piece of your income. Because the numbers this month and the numbers for next month are gonna be pretty freaking awesome. So we'll see you at 3:30 for that and 4 o'clock for Ignite. And have a great weekend. If I don't see you at either of those, see you Monday morning.
Thanks, Rick.
Sure thing.
Thank you, Rick.